The patrons have spoken and they have requested Durant, and we'll be examining how this iron insect splits time and defenses in both the NBA and various Pokemon metagames in this crossover of an episode. And so we ask, how good was Durant actually? And in this video we'll be going over these competitive formats. Despite its excellent speed and solid attack boosted to huge levels with the built-in choice band of Hustle, Durant was not able to break into OU in its debut generation, as it struggled to switch in as a result of its abysmal HP, ensuring it couldn't take many hits. Its defense stat was great but not enough to make up for such a deficit, and its pathetic special defense meant it actually folded to just about every one of the many special attackers in the tier. It was a decent offensive threat, but there was little reason to use it when it could not hope to match the effectiveness of OU's reigning bug steel type, Scizor, who, in addition to better utilizing its useful defensive typing by virtue of its superior bulk and roost, was also more effective offensively thanks to its excellent move pool consisting of Swords Dance, U-Turn Pursuit, and of course its trademark Bullet Punch. As such, Durant never had any impact on OU, or UU for that matter. The tier had too many water, fighting types, electric, fire, and ground types for it to ever consistently threaten a significant enough portion of the tier. However, in RU, Durant not only came into its own, but came to be one of the tier's best, most dangerous and defining Pokemon. It tore through much of the metagame and could fulfill a variety of roles with its numerous excellent sets. With Choice Band, it was one of the tier's most vicious wall breakers, easily able to threaten KOs against the large portion of the tier it outsped, and being able to threaten 2-hit KOs on even the tier's sturdiest defensive Pokemon, thanks to its massive power being perfectly augmented by its coverage options. For example, defensive Steelix and Intimidate Quillfish both thwarted Durant's stab easily, but got destroyed by Superpower and Thunderfang, respectively. Durant was also one of the tier's best late-game sweepers when utilizing Hone Claws, a move seemingly tailor-made for it. In addition to providing the attack boost that allowed Durant to drop targets left and right, Hone Claws also allowed it to bypass the often crippling nature of Hustle's accuracy impediment. Durant also ran another tremendous late-game set with Choice Scarf, which allowed it to clean up weakened teams with ease. Frailer offensive teams that relied on outspeeding Durant with naturally faster Pokemon and or Choice Scarfers were easily ripped apart. Durant was the fastest Scarfer in the tier, which wasn't only a great advantage in getting the jump on the tier's other fast Scarfers in Manectric and Rotom, but also made it a great check to speed boosting setup sweepers like Quiver Dance Lilligant and Dragon Dance for Alligator. Durant was tremendous not just because these sets were incredibly consistent performers on a game-to-game basis, but because despite its relatively small move pool, it has several great options for other sets as well. For example, it could brutally punish defensive answers like Alomomola and Quillfish with a substitute Baton Pass set, which easily set up its destructive teammates. With items like Insect Plate and Iron Plate, it could power itself up while potentially bluffing a choice item and lending another layer of danger to its capability of switching its attacks up, potentially luring in and grabbing a surprise KO against a Pokemon thinking it was safe against the resisted attack Durant has seemingly locked itself into. For this purpose, several gems were also effective, with potentially even greater destructive power. Some players even utilized Protect on Durant for the purpose of racking up more damage against poison targets like Alomomola and scouting the intentions of Choice Scarf revenge killers. Durant was absolutely amazing to the point of being controversial. Several players believed its presence was negative for the RU tier. It wasn't just because it was so dangerous, it was the RNG factor innate to Durant. Many games were affected by Hustle turning 100% accurate attacks into Stone Edge. This wasn't all of what players thought made Durant undesirable though. After all, this wasn't much different from choosing to use Focus Blast or Hydro Pump. No, the part several players didn't like was Durant's ability to cheese its way past would-be checks with Ironhead's nasty 30% flinch rate. It was so strong that it often needed just one flinch to knock the opposing Pokemon into KO range. When paired with Hustle, endgames involving Durant had a nasty tendency to get messy, leading to players experiencing RNG-induced heart attacks left and right. Nevertheless, tiering action was not taken against Durant, and it continued to hold one of the most prominent places in RU. Some players used Swarm as the ability instead of Hustle on Scarf Durant, as they didn't quite need the extra power against frailer offensive Pokemon, and really just needed it to hit its attacks late game. However, Hustle was still one of Durant's most defining features, for better and for worse. Many games were won if Durant hit its attacks, but that was a big if. 80% accuracy meant a battle with Durant was an exciting event 100% of the time. Durant returned to RU with a vengeance in Generation 6. It was dangerous right out of the gate in XY and continued into early ORAS, happily preying on the newly added fairy types with its vicious Ironheads. However, it wasn't considered broken yet. It was a massive threat, but the tier had several solid options to check it through a Moltres now supported by the buff Defog, as well as the massively bulky Eviolite duo of Dual Blade and Glagger. However, all three of these Pokemon eventually rose to UU, and Durant jumped to the precipice of potential brokenness, teetering on the edge edge as the metagame struggled to keep it in check. Forced to resort to desperate measures such as Hidden Power Fire Dugtrio, every team was threatened by Durant, the best offensive Pokemon in the tier for its speed, power, and coverage. Bulky teams feared it above all else as it ripped through defensive staples like Slowking, Cresselia, Diancie, Reuniclus, and Rhyperior, and even its more effective defensive switch-ins such as Emboar and Mega Steelix could still take heavy damage. Offensive teams weren't much better off, as Durant's excellent speed gave it the jump on common offensive Pokemon already considered fast, such as Virizion, Delphox, and Sigilyph. It could also ruin offensive teams even more efficiently with its Choice Scarf set, removing their few options to outspeed it, such as the aforementioned Dugtrio, as well as blazing past other Scarfers like Tyrantrum and Medicham in the late game. The tier tried to adapt for some time, but eventually the player base realized that there was simply no reconciling with Durant and RU. It was just too strong for the tier. The vote on Durant's fate in the tier wasn't close. It was universally viewed as overbearing, which was reflected in the fact that over 80% of the voters voted to ban it. Durant was one of the most devastating, impactful Pokemon in ORAS RU. Sadly, it was not able to find a niche in UU. It wasn't nearly as capable of threatening the faster, bulkier metagame, as it was denied opportunities to switch in and the ability to wreak havoc once it had switched in. As such, Durant languished in RUBO, unable to move either upwards or downwards. Still, the 6th generation was a successful one for Durant, as it established itself as an RU icon once again. Generation 7 Z-moves were an incredible addition for Durant. Not only did they provide devastating bursts of power that made Durant even more brutally difficult to counter, but they ignored accuracy on the turn of their use, including that of the debilitating Hustle, lending Durant even greater reliability in dissecting the opponent's team. It ravaged RU once again, as the tier possessed similar defensive pieces Durant had naturally preyed on in the previous generation, and its checks were far less reliable now. For example, Gligar could no longer handle Iron Head when it was powered up not just by Home Claws, but also Steelium Z into a colossally calamitous corkscrew crash. With similar boosting options for Crunch, Durant could even fell Dual Blade through the brutal, horrifying extremity of Black Hole Eclipse. Durant had a multitude of tremendous options for its Z Crystal. In addition to the aforementioned, it was also an excellent user of Fightinium Z Superpower and Buginium Z X Scizor, and could even effectively use Electrium Z Thunderfang. It could choose which checks it wanted to lure and eliminate with terrifying ease, which made it both a terrifying threat and an offensive facilitator for its other offensive teams. Of course, Durant didn't need Z-moves to be effective, as its usual sets continued to thrive, especially Choice Band, but it was just that Z-moves served to make an already excellent Pokemon even better, to the point of being ridiculous. Defensive teams were incredibly difficult to run because of Durant, as it wasn't just dealing with the ant itself, though that certainly was arduous in its own right, but because it was so easily to open holes for its teammates to exploit. Once again, offensive teams weren't much better off, given how fast Durant was. The metagame barely held itself together against Durant's might during Sun and Moon, and then, not long after the release of Ultra Sun and Moon, the player base decided enough was enough, and Durant was put on the chopping block once again. In a continuation of the mirroring of the events of the previous generation, Durant was once again banned with a resounding majority. More than 85% of voters voted to get rid of it, capping off a 3rd generation of RU dominance for Durant. Unfortunately, Durant also continued to mirror the previous generation by failing to make any sort of mark in UU, which was even faster and bulkier than before. Plus, it was now completely dominated by Scizor, ensuring Durant would not find even a slight niche in the tier. Nevertheless, the 7th generation was another successful one for this metal insect. Generation 8 removed Z-moves, but it made up for this by gifting Durant an incredible new Bug Stab in First Impression. It now had a priority move that was even stronger than X-Scizor. It also received a new coverage move in Stomping Tantrum, meaning fire types could no longer check it safely. With these new tools in its metal mandibles, Durant embarked on a new journey throughout the tiering run. Instead of waiting for RU to come around, it quickly jumped out to dominance in the early stages of Sword and Shield UU. The limited Pokedex meant Durant outsped nearly the entire tier, save for Noivern, which was incredibly popular, but this still meant that Durant usually outsped 4 to 5 members of the opposing team. The metagame was incredibly balance focused at this point, as Milotic and the aforementioned Noivern were 2 of the best Pokemon around, and Umbreon was used quite commonly alongside them as well for its rare, valuable ghost resistance in a metagame where Poltegeist was the top threat. These slow balance teams with a Noivern tacked on were absolutely obliterated by Durant. It barely even needed its coverage, as it usually just clicked its stab moves and watched everything drop. Slower Pokemon couldn't reliably take 2 hits from it, and the faster Noivern was potentially one-hit KO'd by a Life Orb Ironhead. Durant terrorized the tier before Pokemon Home even returned Hone Claws to it, but even without the move, it was monstrously overwhelming. Shortly afterwards, it received a unanimous quick ban from the tier, making its first appearance in and banned from UU in a short amount of time. As if that wasn't enough, UU eventually began giving UU BL Pokemon brief retests. When it came to retest Durant, it was promptly rebanned inside of a week. Durant stayed banned from UU until the Crown Tundra rolled around. The massive Pokédex expansion brought many bulky Pokemon that could handle Durant, thus meaning it no longer had a place in UU. It tumbled to NU. It didn't last long there though. The tier had just about nothing that could switch into it safely, and it validated offense without compromising its wall-breaking ability thanks to the absurd power of the priority first impression. As such, it didn't take long for Durant to get banned to NUBL. This meant that Durant would finally return to RU. It didn't do so technically though. For the first time in history, Durant was not quite good enough to be an RU mainstay, and it retained its title of NUBL rather than becoming a genuine RU Pokemon. However, it still has a legitimate niche. Its potency has been diminished by the number of Pokemon that pack significant bulk and resist its stabs. It's harder for Durant to destroy everything in sight, as it did before, with annoyances such as Incineroar, Volcanion, and Dual Blade thwarting its stab, and being forced to use Stomping Tantrum to try and catch them can be exploited. Plus, Stomping Tantrum's 75 base power can feel meager. Durant is also hurt by the many faster Pokemon added to the tier, and it can't spam first impression as readily as a result of the many solid resistances to the move. Using Durant can be difficult, prediction reliant, and frustratingly inconsistent, which is what holds its usage back. That said, first impression provides nice defensive utility in revenging fast offensive Pokemon like Scarf Xurkitree and Dragon Dance Tyrantrum. Priority is also generally helpful in dealing with the Shell Smashers Poltegeist and Cloyster. And Durant also naturally outspeeds several other popular offensive Pokemon like Cobalion, giving it a unique niche in the tier as an offensively minded check to threats. Overall, despite no longer being RU in name, Durant is still a genuinely good Pokemon in the tier and has enjoyed a massively successful 8th generation overall. The advent of Gen 8 gave Durant just the tool it needed to overcome its consistency issues. With Max Move's perfect accuracy, Durant got all the upside of Hustle with none of the downside, at least while it was Dynamax. Combine that with a Life Orb and you had an overwhelmingly powerful Pokemon capable of running whole teams over if they were ill-prepared. Lead wrong against Durant and you may have lost the game already. Durant's impressive move pool also looked even more impressive in Dynamax. While Durant's fun new tool First Impression was certainly attractive, Iron Head was Durant's bread and butter, and it greatly appreciated the defense boost from Max Steel Spike. Even after that, Durant's bug-type moves arguably weren't the next important slot in its moveset. Stomping Tantrum was essential as coverage against opposing Steel types, and paired up nicely with Steel Spike to give Durant access to boosting for both its defenses. Past that, players had a choice to make between 3 types. Bug moves like First Impression and X-Scissor were of course good for stab, while Rock Slide provided a way to hit flying types, and Max Rockfall's extra power compared to Quake gave Durant the ability to eliminate its biggest threats, Fire types. Rock Slide could also potentially give Durant a way to win in endgame scenarios if it was out of Dynamax. Finally, Thunderfang sacrificed some power for the ability to hit bulky waters like Milotic and Rotom. However, Max Flutterby would often handle water types anyways. Lightning's real upside was setting electric terrain and protecting Durant from getting put to sleep. With so many offensive options, most Durant players forwent Protect. Spending a turn with Durant not attacking, especially in Dynamax, usually means you already have a problem on your hands. Of course, Durant's serious power comes with some serious caveats. While Durant was still strong outside of Dynamax, the accuracy drop from Hustle meant it wasn't a reliable threat. What's more, those thin defenses were just as weak as ever. The extra health from Dynamaxing helped Durant out, sure, but the Ant was still liable to end up roasted, especially against common fire types like Arcanine or Charizard. As such, proper team support was vital for Durant's teams, whether it be through redirection, fake out, or other means we'll talk about later. Despite its overwhelming power, Durant wasn't the most popular team archetype purely because it necessitated so much support. If your Ant was dead, so were you. At the start of the format, players frequently brought Follow Me users like Togekiss or even Flash Fire users like Chandelure to shore up Durant's weaknesses. Togekiss especially could also give Durant a boost with Helping Hand in case it needed a little extra oomph. Durant's best partner in crime, however, was Milotic. For one thing, Milotic obviously could handle fire types that gave Durant a hard time, and for another, it greatly appreciated the boost from Steel Spike and Quake, which could get Milotic to such astronomically high defenses that it could become unkillable. The real boon, however, was Milotic's ability, Competitive. One of the main ways to handle Durant was by repeatedly intimidating it. But if Milotic was on the field, you were just boosting a different mon. Nearly every successful Durant team during Gen 8 VGC had a Milotic right there alongside it. Speaking of successful Durant teams, Durant made its power known as official tournaments got underway at Dallas Regionals. To date, the biggest in-person Pokemon tournament of all time. Bingji Wang took his Durant team all the way to Grand Finals, where he faced an explosive matchup with Aaron Traylor's Charizard team. Bingji showed that Durant could match up against would-be quote-unquote counters like Charizard due to its massive attacking prowess, and additionally showcased just how scary a Durant under Whimsicott Tailwind could be. Although Bingji fell to Aaron in the end, the ripples of his Durant success were felt throughout the bracket. Yi Hui Shu and Kareem DeBliss also used the team to a good amount of success, ending up with a pair of top 64 finishes. A few weeks later, a player named Mr. Gabenwatch took first place at the Online Gallery Weekly 8 with his own Durant team, and just a few weeks after that, Eduardo MC Cunha gave Durant another in-person silver medal at the Oceania Nationals. Eduardo's team was notable for a few reasons. For one, it didn't include Milotic. Instead, Eduardo brought a Gastrodon as his bulky water type. In addition, Eduardo did bring Protect on his Durant, giving it a bit more survivability on the field. That trend would continue on in the new Durant team developed by Justin Lucamere Ramirez. Lucamere's team, which he used to win the online Rose Tower Open, had no Togekiss. In fact, it had no redirection at all. Instead, Lucamere brought Gothitelle, who combined the helping hand of Togekiss with its own fake out and, of course, Shadow Tag. If you thought a gigantic ant was scary before, just wait till it's a gigantic ant that you can't run away from. As Lucamere put it, the threat of the Gothitelle Durant pin was so potent that it could disrupt opponents just from the team select placing other members, like Milotic, Sylveon, and Tyranitar, in a position to succeed. It can't be overstated how hard it is to lead against a team like this. Lead an Intimidate user into Milotic, and you were in incredible trouble. Lead something that couldn't handle Gothitelle and Durant, and trust me, that's quite a large swath of Pokemon, and you were up a creek with no paddle. That's not even accounting for Gothitelle's Trick Room mode with Tyranitar, which should be mentioned precisely because one of the reasons it was so potent was the outsized fear Durant could generate. Lucamere's team didn't just have online achievements though. Lucamere's friend Andrew Ding would bring the team with a few modifications to Collinsville Regionals. The biggest change Andrew made to Durant was swapping Rock Slide for X-Scissor, as he was confident his Tyranitar could handle Charizard teams. When the dust cleared, Andrew had piloted Lucamere's team all the way to a first place regional finish, meaning Durant had tournament wins both on and offline. It's also worth mentioning that veteran player Alessio Yuri Boschetto placed third at Collinsville with a Durant team of his own that utilized Raichu support and Gyarados as a secondary carry. Durant was a Pokemon you absolutely had to prepare for. Its last two placements before in-person tournaments were halted were a pair of fourth place finishes. In Malmo, Matty Morgan put his own spin on Gothitelle Durant by replacing Arcanine with Torracat, while in Perth, Chris Giogozoglo gave it an extra dose of speed with Whimsicott Tailwind support, just like Bingji had in Dallas. However, Durant still remained a less popular option. As Incineroar came back into the meta and Pokemon like Lapras became popular, Durant's power both became less reliable and less overwhelming, and it was nowhere to be found by the time Players' Cup qualifiers rolled around. Nevertheless, it left its mark on 8th Gen VGC in a big way, and if you see an ant on the other side of the field, you should still feel a twinge of fear in your heart. And that's it. So how good was Durant actually? Well, it was one of the best, most defining RU Pokemon of all time. Some consider it so good as to be ban worthy in Generation 5, to which Durant responded by proceeding to remove all doubt and getting itself banned in Generation 6 and 7. In Generation 8, it ascended to a new level with its monstrous first impression, which got it banned from UU twice, and come the Crown Tundra, NU as well. The shifting landscape of RU has been harsher to it, preventing it from even being an official RU Pokemon anymore, let alone one of the metagame's most dominant Pokemon. However, it still has a unique, bona fide niche in the tier. Also, it may have took until Gen 8, but Durant's immediate power in Dynamax allowed it to ascend to new heights it's never seen before for the early parts of Gen 8 VGC. Overall, the lesson Durant teaches is to always hustle. Even if it means you might miss 20% of the time, you'll appreciate the fact that you hit 80% of the time. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thank you so much to our patrons for continued support of our videos and for voting for this Pokemon for this month's patron pick. And thank you to everyone else watching as well. And as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And in the comments, I want to know, what do you think about competitive Durant? Would you ever buff it so that it goes into OU? Whatever it is, let me know in the comments. And follow my crew on these social media platforms. And that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.